following presentation is an Delmarva Studios production.
Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Flat Earth Files. I'm your host, as always, George. Hope you're doing well as we're closing on the end of the first week of 2023, which, like I've said previously, I think this is going to be an interesting year. You know, a lot of people are calling it the year of the skull and bones, as it's been, this year will be the 322nd anniversary of Yale. And, you know, 2023 backwards kind of has that 322 to it. So we'll see. Better to be prepared and not need things than need things and not be prepared. Here at the homestead, we've really been lucky. We invested in a greenhouse in the spring, and we're still pulling carrots and some lettuce here the first week of January. So hope everybody's doing well as it's post-holidays. January is one of those months. It's just brutal, right? You know, a lot of people get the credit card blues. You know, you get the bills from Christmas. We have a big thing where I take all my children and grandchildren out to eat at a very nice restaurant for Christmas. Between the three big meals that we took family members out to, it was well over $1,000 for sure. Nothing's cheap anymore, right? And of course, you're not going to tape, you know, your family to, you know, the Golden Corral. Maybe some people do, but, you know, we try to make it special once a year for the children, and we have a nice time and all spend time together. You know, you all know how life is. Live in different parts of a state. You're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. Then you have the children to take care of, and you just don't have the time to spend with your grown children and your nephews and nieces as much as you would like to. It's just life. It's the you know, it's kind of the hamster wheel that we're in, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I do these podcasts is this system rigged for us to be constantly working and like getting out of a never-ending debt, so we don't stop and think and talk about the things that you listening to this podcast and myself take the time to do. And granted, listen, when I was in the military, working, like, you know, anybody who's been in the military knows how long the days can be. And then after I retired, I got into small business and retail. I had a store at a mall working 70 hours a week. You don't have as much time, but I made time between customers. I'd sit down and pull up my laptop and either listen to lectures or read books. Manly P. Hall, found Bill Cooper, and, you know, slowly made my way down the rabbit hole. And, you know, I think one of the most common questions I get, whether it be this podcast or the Fact Hunter, is how do I wake, you know, my mom, my sister, my brother? I've been trying to wake them up. I think, like, do you remember when you were young and your parents were trying to push something on you? Like, for instance, when I was growing up, my dad was a huge country music guy. I don't really care for country music, never did, even as a young man. My father, but if we were in the car, or I went downstairs to his little area where he had his, you know, 8-track and record player set up, kind of showing my age there, but you get it. He said, "Hey, check this out." And it would just be some country music. And I'm just like, I don't like it. And it's the same way. You get fed this stuff. The more you feed people something, they shy away from it. So breadcrumbs, give them little nuggets, give them, I do to my buddies all the time. I woke one of my best friends in the world up. I've known him for 40 years now. And I would just send him little clips from YouTube videos, and I didn't start with the big stuff. I didn't start with germ theory. I didn't start, which, by the way, I got about a half a dozen emails from Michelle and many other people saying, I'd like to hear that podcast. So I'll go ahead and I'll drop that. And if it's not something that's not up your alley, don't worry, don't listen to it. We'll continue with these at least once a week. I was hoping to do 2 a week, but I've been very, very busy here. So yeah, leave breadcrumbs, send your friends just links to short articles about things, and start slow with the moon landings and things like that. Because if you start with things like the germ theory and flat Earth, they may shut you down. And again, it's really hard to write, I don't know what the word is, unprogram, deprogram people who's been between the news, Hollywood, television, and the 13-year indoctrination system. At least here in the United States, we have kindergarten through 12th grade. And then it gets even worse if you spend the money to go to college. It just, the indoctrination gets deeper and more expensive. So not only are you more, programmed, you're in debt. So there's that. Just leave little nuggets. You can start with JFK, Oklahoma City. One thing for me is the Terrence Yakey story. And for a while, I think it was his sister and his mom, they were going out and giving interviews. And even you haven't seen much from them in recent years. And if you're not familiar with Terrence Yakey stories, take the time to do that. Even if there's one thing you take away from this podcast tonight, I've done several episodes on that young man, a guy who joined the police force, by all accounts, just a great guy, and an outstanding policeman. And on that morning of April 19th, 1995, he was writing someone a traffic ticket, maybe a block away from where the Alfred P. Murrah building exploded. And he left. He was one of the first people on scene, and he spent the entire day bringing people out of that building, and he saw something that he knew did not jive with the official story of Oklahoma City. And they kept telling him, hey, stop looking into it. I mean, imagine you being at a crime scene where you witnessed the crime scene, and then people who were not at the crime scene telling you how it went down. Would you just swallow that pill? I guess depending on how big it is. I don't know. But, I mean, here's a guy who understood the fact that all these 100-plus people died and the public was being lied to. He tried to do something about it, and he was murdered for it. So if you want to wake somebody up, and when people start to realize, well, wait a second, if the moon landing was a hoax, and the CIA and our own government killed a sitting president in 1963 on a day that was full of Freemasonry. 11/22 is 33. 11 is a very powerful number. 22 is even a more powerful number because it's double 11, numerology. That's a whole different subject, whole other day. And then the more you realize how much the government lies, the more susceptible, or that's not the right word to use at all, the more open people will be to listening to bigger, quote-unquote, conspiracies. Just like, we've all had maybe a relationship with someone, maybe just a platonic friend or a boyfriend, girlfriend type of situation where that person, you start to catch them in a few lies, and then you get to a point where you just don't trust them anymore. Well, that's where I'm at right now with our government. I don't trust them at all. Outside of telling me 2 + 2 is 4 and the sky is blue, whatever they tell me, I immediately, I won't take anything without looking into it. You can't. And I think you would do the same thing if you had a friend or a significant other or whatever that continually lied to you, right? Anything you heard from them, you would take the time to research before you took it as God's honest truth, right? That's just how we should be in discerning truth. So there's that. Again, thank you for the emails. We do have, we'll be interviewing a listener next week, the evening of January 11th. So I'll probably release that for the 12th of January for y'all to listen to. I'm sure it'll be a really great conversation. Love to hear thoughts on flat Earth, but I also love to hear the stories of people's waking up. You get people say, I've been awake forever, but I think for the most part, even for those of us who say we're awake, we still find things that we've been lied about. So again, We'll be recording that on January 11th and should be out January the 12th. And I had several emails asking me to drop that germ theory one, so I shall do so. And again, I know it's not flat Earth per se, but I hope it's something you'll take the time to listen to and at least, maybe think twice about, modern medicine and everything else that goes along with it. And I guess my point was have an open mind to everything, because I think many of us at one point or another thought this subject that we're talking about right now, including myself, was the most ridiculous thing ever, flat Earth. But then again, I think for many people, this is the last big rabbit hole we go down. When you finally accept flat Earth, you'll accept anything. And that's kind of what I went with germ theory. So I hope you check it out. And I did have one email I wanted to read. I'm just going to give you his first name. His name was Ross. Okay. And Ross says he just started listening to the podcast. It's very interesting, and he is becoming more and more convinced. And Ross, I'm just glad that you're questioning the official narrative. And again, I always say, I think there's somewhere a parallel between what we believe and what they say, right? Because we've proved without a shadow of a doubt that there's many things that are wrong with heliocentrism, how far you can see, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, like Stephen would said, there's some things that's hard for us to discern. How do tides work without the gravity in the moon and the constellations being up, down? So it kind of works both ways. But the most important thing is people are actually willing to take the time to look into these things instead of just taking, it's the government. The government said it, or the history book said it, or my science teacher said it, so it must be true. That's just not the fact. Ross also goes on to say, we cannot pick and choose what lies we want to believe from the government. They lie about everything, the devil's work. And you're spot on there, Ross. And he also says we can't pick and choose what we want to believe out of the Bible. You either believe all of it or none of it. And that's from Ross. And he also says, P.S., by the way, check out Gary Wayne and the Genesis 6 conspiracy. Interesting. I've not read the whole book yet. I have gone in and out of that with the Nephilim and all that and the bloodlines. Very, very interesting stuff. I do need to sit down, take the earbuds out, close the door, lock the windows, and kind of read into that. So there you go. Thank you, Ross, very much for the kind email. And if you would like to email us, please do. We'd love to hear from you. It is theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Again, that is theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. And thank you for taking the time to support us. And today we're talking about scientific experiments that prove flat Earth, right? And there are many of them. And this is from Flat Earth Facts. And we also have some readings from, what is this site here? The Flat Earth. Oh, Flat Earth 9. It's just a WordPress, but somebody took a lot of good time to put some good research in. But basically, over the years, scientists, and we're talking over the last couple hundred years, scientists have formulated a number of experiments, attempting to prove that the Earth is moving and measure its movement. And, many of these attempts have failed, and they have not been able to prove that A, the Earth is moving, or B, measure the movement or the speed or any of that stuff. These are all theories, right? And again, we have to be fair. While disproving heliocentrism, we can't say that this indeed proves our theory 100%. But it does give a strong indication that the Earth is not moving, right? And as people who are more into the flat Earth theory, that lends more credence to us that the Earth is stationary, thus supporting the flat Earth model. Okay, so let's start with this experiment known as Airy's failure, which proved that the stars move relative to a stationary Earth and is not the other way around, right? It's a sky clock. It's what is basically, again, what is preached in the Bible. And if you look at Airy's failure, this was a test that was conducted by astronomer, this guy's got like 14 names, astronomer Royal Sir George Biddell Airy, henceforth Airy's failure, in 1871, in which Airy failed to detect the motion of the Earth. And you're starting to see a trend here. All these experiments happen post-Civil War, Reconstruction time, in a time when they really start to take hold of the history books, the science books. The Rockefellers are slowly starting to come in, and they in turn will take over education and the medical industry. And you see the agenda they're trying to push, right? And during this experiment, Airy, failed to detect the motion of the Earth. And this experiment showed that the stars move relative to a fixed Earth, okay? By first filling a telescope with water to slow down the speed of light, and then calculating the tilt necessary to get the starlight directly down the tube. So Airy unintentionally demonstrated that the Earth was fixed horizontally because the starlight came in at the correct angle without needing to change the tilt of the telescope. Many people think it's proven long ago that the world orbits the sun. However, the results of two simple experiments, both performed in the 19th century, showed that it's stars which move, not the world. And again, we just mentioned George Airy, after whom the Airy disk of diffraction theory is named. And it's really a variation of an earlier investigation by Francois Arago, which he performed with a moving slab of glass back in 1810, some 60 years earlier. Now, Arago showed that either light itself or the luminiferous aether is dragged along by a moving piece of glass. Fresnel explained the effect by assuming it was the light-carrying medium. This is called the Fresnel drag. Now, George Stokes explained it via compression to ether. But the important point is whether we can tell which one is doing the moving, the light source or the transparent material. When Arago investigated this effect with starlight, he concluded that the world, with respect to which the glass plate was stationary in this instance, was at rest and that it was the stars that were moving. The experiment subsequently performed by Airy was proposed by Ruggiero Boscovich for testing James Bradley's heliocentric aberration idea back in 1728. This, in turn, was thought up to explain the elliptical motion of the star Gamma Draconis, as observed by James Bradley and Samuel Molyneux over a fairly long time period commencing in 1725. So what was the result of Airy's experiment? Exactly the opposite outcome to that predicted in the rotating world scenario. And that's why, in many cases, when you kind of research into this, you'll see that this particular experiment is usually referred to as Airy's failure for that reason. And just like Arago before him, George Airy proved that the world was stationary and that the stars were moving. Okay? It does not matter whether there exists its luminiferous ether or not, because the dragging of starlight, as demonstrated initially by Arago, is real, irrespective of how we try to explain it. Both Arago and Airy showed that it is the stars, not the world, which move, even though Airy didn't go so far to admit this. And just, a note on Francois Arago. He performed this same similar experiment designed to collect the light of stars near the ecliptic at different times of the year, as the Earth would be moving at different velocities, either towards or away from the stars in its orbit around the sun. Quote, the problem of refraction in moving bodies became an issue in the wave of theory of light because of an experiment formed in 1810 by Francois Arago in the context of the particle theory. He wanted to determine light particles entering a prism would be refracted differently depending on their velocity with respect to the prism. So, to this end, he considered the refraction of light from the same star over the course of an entire year. And changes in the velocity of the Earth with respect to the star would presumably produce changes in the relative velocity of the Earth and the light particles emitted by the star. And Arago observed no such effect on the refraction of the star's light. Following Arago's results, various theories were put in place to explain it. From the 10 Most Beautiful Experiments by George Johnson, you read the explanation given by Augustin Jean Fresnel. Quote, a French scientist, Francois Arago, had tried to measure the velocity of starlight colliding with the Earth. Arago assumed, naturally enough, that the speed he would vary depending on whether the orbiting planet was approaching or retreating from the light source. He mounted a prism on the end of a telescope, predicting that faster light beams would be bent more abruptly than slower ones. And he was surprised to find that whatever the season, the angles were always the same. Arago concluded that our eyes must be sensitive to only small-range velocities, that the faster and slower rays were invisible. They always had an answer, didn't they? But his colleague Augustin Jean Fresnel came up with a different explanation. While ether flows effortlessly through matter's molecular cracks, a tiny bit had become stuck in Arago's prism, carried along for the ride. That, he explained, would negate the effect Arago was seeking. When the Earth was approaching a star, its light would indeed strike the prism at a higher speed. But then it would be slowed to a compensating amount by the ether trapped inside the glass. The effect would be true for any transparent medium. Fresnel proposed and would depend on its index of refraction, which a measurement of how much it slows and bends light. And then there was Olber's paradox, which was quite simple. So in a nutshell, Olber's paradox states that if there were billions of stars, which are the suns of the night sky, the night sky would be completely filled with light, but yet at night it's completely dark. And Edgar Allan Poe actually once said, quote, were the succession of stars endless, then the background of the sky would present us a uniform luminosity, since there could exist absolutely no point in all that background at which would not exist a star. In fact, Olber's paradox is no more a paradox than George Airy's experiment was a failure. Both are actually excellent refutations of the heliocentric spinning ball model. And this, if I'm not mistaken, this paradox goes back to, the 6th century Greeks, and this stuff was in the Alexandria Library. A lot of these, big thinkers back in the time were from Alexandria in Greece. In Egypt. Pardon me, of course. And it was founded by Alexander the Great. And, of course, we all know about the famous library that burned down. So, again, Olber's paradox, which is also known as the dark night sky paradox. It's this, It says that the darkness of the night sky conflicts with the assumption of an infinite and eternal static universe. And in the hypothetical case that the universe is static, homogeneous at a large scale, and populated by an infinite number of stars, any line of sight from Earth must end at the surface of a star, and hence the night sky should be completely illuminated and very bright. So this contradicts the observed darkness and non-uniformity of the night. And of course, they try to use this and fold it into their evidence for their dynamic universe, such as the Big Bang model, which we all know is complete trash, garbage, and true fiction is what that is indeed. Then, of course, there's the Michelin, Morley, and Sagnac experiments, which attempted to measure the change in speed of light due to Earth's assumed motion through space. And after measuring in every possible different direction in various locations, they failed to detect any significant change. And most scientists are familiar with the Michelin-Morley experiment. And again, that failed to detect any movement of the Earth around the sun. So this had to be overcome so that the Fitzgerald-Lorentz shortening of the apparatus was proposed. And eventually, the paradoxical relativity theory was invented by the fraudster, I like to call him, Einstein, who is no Einstein, to overcome this problem. However, there are three other experiments that have been deliberately ignored by universities and others to support geocentricity. And we've already spoken about one, Airy's failure, with the telescopes being slightly tilted, trying to check the speed of the sun and the Earth going around the sun, I should say. And that demonstrated that the stars were moving. Then the Michelin-Gale experiment, and that detected that the ether passing the surface of the Earth with an accuracy of 2% of the speed of the daily rotation of the Earth. Thus, the Michelin-Morley experiment detected absolutely no movement of the Earth around the sun. Then there are Foucault's pendulums, and they are often quoted as proof of a rotating Earth. But upon closer investigation, it proved to be the opposite. And to begin with, Foucault's pendulums do not uniformly swing in any one direction. Sometimes they rotate clockwise, and sometimes counterclockwise. And sometimes they fail to rotate, and sometimes they rotate far too much. So the behavior of the pendulum actually depends on, number one, the initial force beginning its swing, and number two, the ball and socket joint used, which most readily facilitates circular motion over any other. And the supposed rotation of the Earth is completely inconsequential and irrelevant to the pendulum swing. If the alleged constant rotation of the Earth's affected pendulums in any way, then there should be no need to manually start pendulums in motion. Something to think about. If the Earth's diurnal rotation caused the 360 degree uniform diurnal rotation of pendulums, then there should not exist a stationary pendulum anywhere on Earth. That is something to think about. Then, of course, there's the Coriolis effect, and that's often said to cause, sinks and toilet bowls in the northern hemisphere to drain spinning in one direction, while in the southern hemisphere, causing them to spin the opposite way, thus providing proof of the spinning ball Earth. And once again, very much like Foucault's pendulums, spinning either which way, sinks and toilets in both the northern and southern hemispheres do not consistently spin in any one direction. It has to do with the force of the water, which side of there's so much that goes into it. By the way, that's something you can find very easily on YouTube. And I'm going to pause this to see if I can find one real quick. And after a brief search, I found a video entitled "The Coriolis Effect is a Mathematical Theory." It's about 10 minutes long. And I'll put that in the show description. I think I did a quick run through. I think you'll enjoy it. It looks pretty good. And then the second law of thermodynamics, which is otherwise known as the law of entropy, along with the fundamental principles of friction and resistance, determine the impossibility of Earth being a uniformly spinning ball. And over time, the spinning ball Earth would experience measurable amounts of drag, constantly slowing the spin and lengthening the amount of hours per day, as not the slightest such change has ever been observed in all of recorded history. It's simply absurd to assume that this Earth that we walk on every single day has ever moved an inch. And think about it, they've changed the calendar. Here's something for you. I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned it on this program, but the ancient, I think it was the American Indians. I could be completely wrong here. But if you look at the back of a turtle, it's got 13 squares on its inside, then it's got 28 little notches on the outside, which many people say that is the true calendar, 13 months, 28 days long. And then there's the extra day or something like that. Please take the time. Just put turtles back calendar, and you can research that for days. I think I spent 2 or 3 days down that rabbit hole a couple of years ago. It's very interesting, though. But it's funny how these people hundreds of years ago, especially the Indians, with medicine and the turtle's back being a calendar, and how man steps in and says, no, that's all wrong. You need vaccinations and the Julian calendar, and Sunday is the Sabbath. And you kind of see where I'm going with all this. I think it's very important that we question everything. Yeah, even the spinning ball, because again, let's do some experiments that support the ball, because we can see too far. That's a huge one, right? You can't argue that. We can see too far. And fisheye lenses give the appearance of a curved Earth. It's flat. Water always finds its level, can't stick to a ball. I'd like to hear your thoughts either way. There's 2 ways. Again, you can send us an email, theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Again, it's theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. And I said I like to keep these episodes separately, but if you go to my podcast homepage, thefacthunter.com, I don't want to spend a bunch of money for different websites, but if you go to thefacthunter.com, on the top right, if you're on a computer, if you're on your cell phone, it should appear pretty quickly as you scroll. There's something called SpeakPipe. And using your phone or your computer, whatever device, you can record up to like a 5 or 10 minute message. And it comes to me in an email in an MP3, and I can play it for the masses to hear. So send us an email. Go to my other website, thefacthunter.com, thefacthunter.com. You can leave a message on the SpeakPipe. It says leave a message, and I'll be able to tell very easily if it's for that podcast or this one, if it's about Flat Earth. So there you go. I really want this to be a listener-involved podcast. Not only do I want to hear your thoughts about the Flat Earth, the pros, why you think it is, some of the things that you're still not so sure about, which, listen, there's these questions on both sides of the aisle, whether it be heliocentric or flat, flat Earth theory. And I think just from everything that I've laid down on both sides, especially with the evil numerology with heliocentrism, and just the distrust of the government, the lies of going to the moon, lie to me once, shame on you. Lie to me twice, shame on me if I keep buying into it, right? At some point, we have to say, okay, I don't trust these people at all anymore. And that's where I am with, the people who are running the show, the people who control the history books, the science books, the television, Hollywood, so on and so forth, et cetera, right? So there you go. I'd love to hear back from everyone. Again, a big one for you guys to look at, the curvature of the Earth at 8 inches per mile squared, as specified in the Pythagoras theory, right? We can see too far. We've spoken about the Michelin-Morley experiment. They can't prove that the Earth is moving. Because listen, you want to talk about the guy who went up in the Red Bull, right? He should have landed like in California if the Earth was spinning. He wouldn't have landed straight back down where he was, right? That in itself doesn't make any sense. And listen, Einstein's theory is of E equals mc squared, which was originally designed to prove the heliocentric model. Question everything, especially cosmology, astronomy, so on and so forth. We have to question everything. So I think we'll wrap that up there for today. As I previously noted, I'll go ahead and drop the podcast from last week. It'll be entitled, Flat Earth and Germ Theory or something simple like that. And I hope you like it. If you don't, no worries. We're going to have some great podcasts coming up for you. We're going to have some listener involvement, some conversations, and hopefully it'll encourage others to, want to step up and join the program as well. So have a great weekend. God bless each and every one of you. I hope this podcast finds you well. And again, if you can email us, theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Again, theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Everyone, God bless, take care, and have a tremendous weekend. Keep your head on a swivel. And until next time, my friends, we will see you.
You're listening to the Fact Hunter Radio Network.
Just the facts, ma'am.